Okay, welcome to lesson 19. So these are the part 3 advanced answers based off the general theme of the part 2s, as is the same in the speaking test. So let's get into it. So as usual, a reminder from me, because I keep wanting you to remember this when you're preparing for your actual speaking test. It's all about language, ideas about the world, and discourse knowledge. Your ability to manage the elements of a basic conversation about wider social issues. Easy to say, but how do we do it? Well, language. So, improving your English language ability, as I keep saying, it's not really about complex language. Advanced English is about using lexical chunks naturally, idiomatic expressions that native speakers really use, mainly about natural common collocations. Language can be developed a lot by reading contemporary news and opinion articles and highlighting a lot of the lexical chunks and language and structures and patterns you see, and flexibly learning how to use them in your own answers and context. Discourse, you could say, is the art of conversation, responding with your own thoughts, linking your ideas logically, managing discourse markers and linking words in a natural, more native way, not rushing your speech, speaking clearly without being hurried. Pronunciation and speech rate will improve fluency because you'll buy yourself time as well as sounding like a native by pausing in the correct places. Listen to online discussions between native speakers and pick out the strengths and weaknesses. Okay, so ideas about the world. Take an interest in issues home and abroad and globally. Read about the world. It doesn't have to be highly academic. It does not have to be highly political. If you like sports, read about sporting news. Read also about what's happening in the world, key discussions, debates, topics of controversy or opinion. What local issues face your country, your city, your social group, your area of society? What are people worried about? Think about these things. Think about them really. Note your ideas down, because these are the things which you can cover when talking about wider social issues. So, part 3, remember, is based on the topic of part 1, if only loosely and generally. A discussion with the examiner about wider social issues, not your personal life. It involves giving and supporting opinions, your own opinions, but not about you. Right, so in this lesson, we'll talk about typical part 3 question types. And in this lesson, we will cover the topics of 1. Future technology and innovation, future priorities and dilemmas, using the discussion techniques of speculating about future events and outcomes, and disagreeing, partially disagreeing, and doubting. Okay. So part 3, the examiner says, now we've been talking about an invention that you think is useful. I'd like to ask you 1 or 2 more general questions related to this. First, let's discuss technologies and innovations that will influence the future. Okay. Open discussion activity. What technologies and innovations do you think will have a big impact in the future? See what my answer is. What technologies and innovations do you think will have a big impact in the future? I think that the most important innovations that will influence our future are those to do with space technology and space travel. I recently read an article about space tourism, actually. I think it's very likely that space travel will become a popular activity for people in the future. There are lots of wealthy people who are already paying money to travel in space, So I think that within a few years, people will be making regular trips into space, sort of like excursions. Also, as the Earth is becoming overpopulated, there is little doubt that we will need to explore space and start to develop technologies that will enable us to inhabit other planets. I think it's pretty unlikely that we will do this within a few years, but I believe it is highly probable that within a few decades we will see the first human colonies on Mars. Wow. So this is a long answer. The examiner probably won't give you time to say such a long answer, but I want to give you lots of language to work on and practice. And if you're speaking well, the examiner may let you continue. So, intro. What are the strong points of this introduction? I think that the most important innovations that will influence our future are those to do with space technology and space travel. I recently read an article about space tourism, actually. Logic. So, state what the most important are in your opinion, in my opinion. I think that the most important innovations: 2. Use a quite authentic native speaker discourse technique. I recently read an article about space tourism, actually. That's a great authentic native speaker discourse technique. I recently read an article about space tourism, actually. So it's actually connecting the examiner's question with something that relates to your life. It's a good technique. Referencing, referring to things mentioned earlier correctly, grammatically correctly. I keep bringing this up, actually, because it's very important to be more and more aware of this. Mistakes that prevent learners from scoring over a 6 or 6.5 are often to do with referencing. I think the most important innovations that will influence our future are those to do with, are those related to, are those to do with space technology and space travel. Innovations is plural, so we say are those to do with. Innovations are those innovations to do with, the innovations related to. Are those, plural verb to be, plural demonstrative adjective. Those refers to the innovations, plural agreement. Are those to do with. Sounds silly, I repeat this. It just sounds so beautifully native, and it sounds so terrible when you get it wrong. So referencing is so important, and this is a slightly more complex level of referencing because it's in a longer, more fluid sentence. Examples of this structure. I think that the most important innovations that will influence our future are those to do with space technology and space travel. I believe that the most important inventions this century are those relating to or related to, we can say they're both in this sense, communications technologies. I think that the most significant developments in our time are those to do with environmental technologies. The main technologies that will impact our lives in the future are those that will contribute to environmental improvements. See how my final third example is a future example. I'll read it again. The main technologies that will impact our lives in the future are those that will contribute towards environmental improvements. You could also say, are those to do with environmental improvements, or those relating to. So you can actually use the present tense here, but because I'm talking about a future contribution, an action verb, rather than something relating to, which is more of a like a state verb, that's why I'm putting in the will future. If I used related to, or relating to, or to do with, I could actually stick to the present or the infinitive. So bear that in mind. It's because contribute is an action verb. We're talking about an action which is in the future. That's why I say will contribute to. So be careful about these Subtle nuances of meaning that get you up to that much higher level. So referencing more examples, get them right in terms of the demonstrative pronouns here. It, this, that, they, these, those. Technology companies are continually developing to stay ahead of the competition. This means that they must keep investing in research. This means, very native thing to say, this means that. We don't just say they must keep investing in research. We connect it natively. This means that they must keep investing in research. This, what does it refer to? Why do I say this? This refers to the phenomena, not the technology companies. Think about what it refers to. The phenomena of them continually developing to stay ahead of the competition. So that's where it gets a little bit, this is where the higher levels start coming out. Technology companies are continually developing to stay ahead of the competition. This means that they must keep investing in research. This means that. This phenomena, this thing which is happening, not the technology companies themselves, but the activity of them developing to stay ahead of the competition is what this refers to. Very, very important here. Most people think that space travel will be commonplace, will be normal in the future. However, I think it's something that will only be popular amongst the wealthy. This example, it is referring directly to space travel, a singular phenomena, space travel in general. Billionaires like Elon Musk and Richard Branson are investing a lot in space tourism. That's why I believe there is a strong possibility that we will see excursions into outer space in the near future. That's why. What does that refer to? Again, that refers to the phenomena of billionaires like Elon Musk and Richard Branson investing in lots of space. You could also say this is why, actually. But I would say that's why, because we often do this when we give a reason. That's why, or this is why. So it's okay to say both. But that's why I believe. This is why I believe. Both are okay. I just want to show you some variety. And we're giving reasons as well, and that makes it sound a little bit more distant, maybe. Anyway, many people say that this is a waste of money, and they should invest in medical care and environmental technologies instead. Such criticisms are quite common today, especially with all the environmental concerns. Okay, so we've got this and we've got such. This is a waste of money. Again, this phenomena that Elon Musk, Richard Branson investing in space tourism. Space tourism is this phenomena, this thing. Many people say this is a waste of money and they should invest in medical care and technologies. Such criticisms. Such means criticisms like these. Criticisms like the ones I'm just talking about. That's what such means. These kinds of criticisms. So remember that. Such equals like these. Criticisms like this, like these. These kinds of criticisms. So such criticisms, we say that when we've just mentioned them. Such criticisms are quite common today, especially with all the environmental concerns. So I've just given you a taste of how to use this, that, those, these, such. Try to get these right. I suggest you go off and practice these. You go onto the internet, you find examples to practice these and get them right, because they really sound very native when they're used correctly in these kinds of sentences. So, referencing continued. Many people believe that teaching creativity and critical thinking in schools will help us become increasingly innovative in the future. These qualities are considered to be essential in today's educational institutions. What does these qualities refer to? Well, there are a lot of technologies that will impact the future. the advancement of robotics, communication technologies, and those related to sustainable development and alternative energy. All these inventions, innovations, will have a big influence on our societies in the coming years. So those is more general, these is more specific. Just specifically mentioned, we might say these. Those is perhaps a little more general. Again, don't worry too much about this, but make sure that when you use these, it's something a bit more specific that you've just been talking about. It brings you closer to the feeling of what you're talking about. I'll read this again. Well, there are a lot of technologies that will impact the future. The advancement of robotics, communication technologies, and those related to sustainable development. Those. All these innovations, these ones I've just mentioned, not those that will be in the future, or those that might be made in the future. All these innovations, the ones I've just described, quite a subtle difference here, will have a big influence on society in the coming years. So, those is more general. These is being specific to the ones you've just mentioned. Future, will, plus doubt and certainty. More examples, get them right. I think it is very likely that space travel will become a popular activity for people in the future. So, I think that within a few years, people will be making regular trips into space, sort of like excursions. There is little doubt that we need to explore space and start to develop technologies that will enable us to inhabit other planets. I think it's pretty unlikely that we will do this within a few years. But I believe it is highly probable that within a few decades we will see the first human colonies on Mars. So, lots of future simple here. Very likely that something will become. We will be making future continuous, because you're emphasizing that these trips will regularly happen. We'll be making regular trips into space. There's little doubt that we need to explore space. We'll start to develop technologies that will enable us to inhabit other planets, etc. Right. Phrases to express levels of certainty. Copy this table down. It's quite useful. Remember this language and put them into phrases, longer phrases of your own. So, very certain. It's highly, very, extremely likely that. There's little doubt. There's no doubt that. There's every likelihood, a strong likelihood that. Something is bound to happen. It's very possible, probable, that. Inevitable, that. Moderate certainty, moderately certain. It's quite likely that. It may or might or could well happen. It will probably happen. There's a strong possibility that it could happen. There's a good, fair or reasonable chance that it could happen. Very uncertain. There's little or no chance that. There's almost no chance that that will happen. There's a very slight possibility that that will happen. Okay, think about how you can use these. Very certain phrases, moderately certain phrases, and very uncertain phrases with your future speculations. Examples. It is highly likely that tourism in space will become a reality. There's no doubt that space travel will get cheaper and cheaper. There's a strong likelihood that commercial flights to the moon will become a regular occurrence. I doubt if humans will be able to survive on Mars. It seems inevitable that people will live on other planets. Whether or not we will solve the environmental issues facing us today will depend on our government's decisions and our energy use. I think new opportunities will open up for creative careers. While millionaires may go into space, ordinary people certainly won't be able to afford it in the foreseeable future. Again, stop this slide, rewind it, play it again, look at these structures, think about how you're going to use them in your own answers. Time expressions with the future. So, master a handful of future time expressions. I think it's pretty unlikely that we will do this within a few years, but I believe it is highly probable that within a few decades we will see the first human colonies on Mars. Think also how I've emphasized, I think it's pretty unlikely we'll do this within a few years, but I believe it's highly probable that within a few decades, I overstress decades because I'm comparing it to years, we will see the first human colonies on Mars. So expressions with future coming from that would be in the foreseeable future. So we could say that instead of within a few years or within a few decades. In the foreseeable future, in the near future, in the distant future, a long time from now, in years to come, in the coming years. Right, so other technologies. You could also speak about other technologies, of course. Robots, self-driving cars, domestic robots, factory robots, communication technologies like smartphones or satellites, computers, the impact on work, the internet, environmental technologies, alternative energy, sustainable development. So go online and look at these general topics. Robots, communication technologies, computer, the internet, environmental technologies. Build up some lexis on these topics. Not just individual word lists, as I've said, but phrases which are common to discuss these different topics, because they do come up quite a lot. Building ideas and vocabulary. This is a template you could use. Topic, robots, communication technologies, computers and the internet, environmental technologies. Note down ideas, thoughts, things you've read, things that come to mind, lexical chunks, groups of words. Use a template like this on white paper to do so when you're reading articles about these topics. This is a great way to build ideas and vocabulary in context and the phrases that are quite common in these fields. So task, draw a table like this, please complete it. Look online, note down main themes, key ideas, arguments and debates, key vocabulary, collocations, lexical chunks, really brainstorm it down, then start sorting out the things you've drawn from what you've read or seen. Right, open discussion activity. Governments sometimes spend a lot of money on space exploration. To what extent do you agree that this is worth spending? Bit more of a complex question. Governments sometimes spend a lot of money on space exploration. To what extent do you agree that this is worthwhile spending? Let's break down the question. Because part 3 is an open discussion, the examiner can phrase the questions in many different ways. And depending on the examiner's personality and way of speaking, you might find some strange phrasings or phrasings which you find are new or a little strange or a little complicated. To what extent do you agree that this is worthwhile spending? Worthwhile spending is worth spending money on. So just be aware of some of these phrasings. I've intentionally presented a complex one, but worthwhile spending is not difficult to understand. But what's that referring to? Think and try and really pull out the major points in the question the examiner is really asking you about. Let's break down that question. To what extent do you agree? Okay, it's an agree and disagree question. It's inviting you to give a nuanced answer. To what extent? You know, to what level do you agree and why, basically? You should state the degree of your agreement. You can also express doubt and uncertainty. There's no right or wrong answer to the question. So, governments sometimes spend a lot of money on space exploration. To what extent do you agree that this is worthwhile spending? Right. Well, this is a bit out of my league. I think it requires some specialist subject knowledge to reach a proper conclusion. However, I tend to disagree that spending lots of money on space exploration is worthwhile. I am really unsure whether or not it's a good idea to invest so much in something like this when there are serious problems for countries on Earth that need to be addressed, like medical care, hospitals, and poverty. It's difficult to say I completely disagree, but my feelings are that it should not be a top priority for a country until other major issues have been dealt with first. On the other hand, I can see why countries might want to be ambitious and keep exploring space. Often discoveries in outer space can have great benefits for humankind on Earth. It's a very good answer, actually. Let's break it down. Intro statements. For more technical or difficult topics, look how I've phrased. This is a great phrase you could use. Well, this is a bit out of my league. I think it requires some specialist subject knowledge to reach a proper conclusion, however I feel. Again, how you pronounce the sentence will depend whether it sounds very native or very bad. So try and copy my pronunciation. Not my accent, but the word stress and the pausing of my phrasing. I'm not sure I'm qualified to say, but this is probably a question for the experts. However, it's difficult to say. So, I'm not sure I'm qualified to say, but this is how I feel. This is probably a question for the experts. However means but in this context. However, I tend to feel. It's difficult to say, but I feel. So this is a bit out of my league is quite a good phrase. It means it's a bit beyond your ability to make a solid conclusion, but you're going to mention your feelings anyway. So, partial disagreement. For more technical or difficult topics, you will therefore probably like to only partially agree or disagree, because that's all you're really qualified to do. So you could say, I see your point, but. I agree to a point, but. I tend to disagree with that. I can see why some people think this, but I'm not sure I agree. I don't entirely agree with that because, plus your opinions or reasons. Notice how I'm saying that. I'm saying it in a voice which is also expressing a bit of uncertainty. Uncertainty with the premise, the main point. For more technical or difficult topics, I am really unsure whether or not it's a good idea to invest so much in something like this when there are serious problems for countries on Earth that need to be addressed, like medical care, hospitals, and poverty. It's difficult to say I completely agree, but. So I'm really hedging here. I'm not really wanting to show complete certainty because I'm showing I'm unsure about the topic. It sounds intelligent to show you're unsure about the topic. It sounds stupid when someone pretends they know about a topic they don't really know about and has a solid, decided opinion. That sounds like, not very intelligent. An intelligent person is not scared to say, I'm not really sure. and then try and express how they feel based on things they know or have heard. Other examples. I'm unsure whether or not it's a good idea to. It's difficult to say I completely disagree, but plus partial disagreement. I'm in two minds about this. Can't really decide. I'm a little undecided about what I think on this topic, to be honest. I'm a little undecided about what I think on this topic, to be honest. Okay. 4, giving opinions in nuanced structures. Same theme, basically. I am really unsure whether or not it's a good idea to invest so much in something like this when there are serious problems for countries on earth that need to be addressed, like medical care, hospitals, poverty. My feelings are that it should not be a top priority for a country until other major issues have been dealt with first. On the other hand, I can see why countries might want to be ambitious and keep exploring space. Often, discoveries in outer space can have great benefits for humankind on Earth. Often, discoveries in outer space can have great benefits for humankind on Earth. Breaking this down. Let's break it down. Questioning priorities, giving opinions. I'm unsure whether or not it's a good idea to invest so much in something like this when there are serious problems for countries on Earth that need to be addressed, like medical care, hospitals and poverty. I'm unsure whether it's a good idea to focus on space exploration when there are more serious issues that need to be addressed. We can change this structure around a bit. We don't have to keep it to my structure, which is a little bit complex. We can simplify it. We can use this structure when we're questioning a decision or a course of action, because we think there is a higher priority that should be addressed first. I'm unsure whether it's a good idea to focus on when there are more serious issues that need to be addressed. More examples of this so we can get the pattern in our minds a bit more crystallized. I'm unsure whether it's a good idea to teach children about art and drama when there are more important things they should learn, like maths and languages. I'm unsure people should spend so much time arguing about politics when there are serious environmental concerns that need to be addressed. I'm unsure whether we should be concentrating so much on developing the cities when the countryside towns are still very poor and in need of development too. So see how I'm using these exact same structures, basically, in very different topic areas, but still the point is the same. So do try to remember and write sentences of your own with these structures. So task. Exactly what I'm going to ask you to do now. Complete the sentences with your ideas, with ideas of your own. I'm unsure whether it's a good idea to when there are. I'm not certain people should when there are. I'm unsure whether we should be doing when. So, again, get the grammar right, because depending on the structures you use to fill in this bigger sentence, this big phrase, depends on how you adjust your grammar. So be a bit careful about this, please. But do write these. In fact, I would ask you to write 3 or 4 examples of each, so it really goes into your head and stays there. More examples: questioning priorities and giving opinions. My feelings are that it should not be a top priority for a country until major issues have been dealt with. So we've got verb, ing, plus activity, should not be a top priority, plus present perfect. Spending money on space should not be a priority until we have already dealt with environmental issues facing the planet. Trying to compete in the space race should not be a priority until a country has solved issues like poverty and poor medical care. So verb plus ing plus should not be a priority plus present perfect. Showing you can see the other side. Again, very important. After stating my thoughts and opinions, I show I can see the other opinion. On the other hand, I can see why countries might want to be ambitious and keep exploring space. Often, discoveries in outer space can have great benefits for humankind on Earth. So we can, in spoken English, say on the other hand, even if we have not said on the one hand previously. It's a given we're now balancing out our opinion. But we do say it when we've stated an opinion previously, and then we're showing we see the other opinion. So we could say, having said that, I understand why. That's another great way of doing it. Having said that, I can understand why countries might want to be ambitious and explore space. You know, having said that I don't think we should, having said that, I can understand why people do. So showing you can see the other side. On the other hand, I can see why countries might want to be ambitious and keep exploring space. Often discoveries in outer space can have great benefits for humankind on Earth. So, positive paraphrase. Having said that, I really can understand why some nations want to explore space. A lot of technologies developed in the space race can be beneficial to developments here on Earth. Okay. So what's the logic? We've got partial disagreement and opinion. I don't really think governments should spend so much money on space when there are problems on Earth, and expression of understanding of the other side. On the other hand, I can see why countries might want to be ambitious, keep exploring space. Often discoveries in outer space can have great benefits for humankind on Earth. So look at these two parts. When I keep breaking it down and repeating, because I want you to get what parts I'm using and how you'd put these together in your own answers. So native speakers often construct arguments in this way to show a nuanced, intelligent consideration of a topic when giving an opinion. Extra techniques like hedging. Hedging makes our statements seem much more advanced. Hedging is when we're adding bits to not show total commitment to an absolute idea. Look at these sentences. Complete these with one of the words above, actually. Let's do this activity. So, evidently, basically, apparently, and somewhat. Four good adverbs we can use when we want to hedge. So, most people are good. I'm using very simple sentences now so we can see how these are used. Most people are good. The earth is getting hotter. We're sure of this. The fire was caused by an electrical fault. So they say. So I'm putting in brackets the level of certainty to give you an idea of, to help you with this activity. We're imagining there in a wider context. So the fire was caused by an electrical fault. Let's imagine we're not sure, so they say. Some people say. Politicians are dishonest. To some extent, or partially. We don't want to say they are. Let's say we want to say they partially are. So let's see how we can use these words. Think about the four words and how you might put each of these four into the spaces to soften what we're saying along the lines of what I put in brackets as well. The brackets are basically here to help. Okay, so look at these sentences. Basically, most people are good. Basically. Evidently, the earth is getting hotter. We're sure of that. We have some evidence, evidently, as they say, in a certain degree of certainty. Apparently, the fire was caused by an electrical fault. So they say, but we're not sure. Apparently, the fire was caused by an electrical fault. Apparently is like hearsay. We're not totally sure. We don't really have evidence, but apparently. Politicians are somewhat dishonest. Somewhat kind of means to some extent or partially, actually. So, move on and brainstorm notes for the following future-related topics. Again, your ideas, your brainstorms is the only way you're going to go forward with really practicing the language that I'm presenting with you in the context will improve your English. Spending money on space exploration. Get a white sheet of paper and write down pros and cons, advantages, disadvantages. Write down your ideas, your thoughts, lexical chunks, language which comes out of those ideas that you think is going to be useful to talk about this topic. All education moving online. No classrooms. Education moving 100% online. What are the advantages and disadvantages? Get a piece of paper, write them down. The ideas, but also the language which you're going to use to talk about the topic. Robots doing most humans' jobs. Obviously, there are advantages and disadvantages to this. Write them down. Write down language which starts to come out that you want to use. So, the task is read the Part 3 questions below and develop full answers to both, using the templates I've just shown you as a preparation guide. Of course, you can't do this in the test because it's Part 3, but we're training to optimize how we perform in any given situation in the test. So, develop answers for each of the 3 following Part 3 questions. Do you agree that it is a good thing if robots do all human beings' jobs in future? To what extent do you think governments should spend money on exploring outer space? What do you think will be the future of communication technologies? What will be the next major developments? So, think about this, make a template, brainstorm your notes, pull out the lexis and language you want to use, start writing sentences, build your examples on paper, try and make them sound natural using a lot of the native speaker techniques I've been talking about in the past 19 lessons, 20 lessons, okay? So please do this. Use this language, correct yourself, criticize yourself, self-correct, and make sure you get these basic errors right and you're referencing between sentences and phrases and paragraphs. That will really make you sound more native. Speak your answers out loud, pausing, stressing important content words. Getting that pronunciation right will help you with your fluency score as well. Okay, thank you very much. I'll see you in the next lesson.